Here's 20 seconds from Ro Khanna.
I took out a lot of student loans. I've done well. They shouldn't forgive student loans for people like me. But if you're working class, you're first in your family to go to college, you have all this debt, and then you're paying off your debt until you're 50 or 60 and can't get a house, we can pay off that debt. And you know how we pay for it? Tax Elon Musk. Tax the billionaires. We're not taxing the blue-collar guys.
All right, so there's just a little example here. We're going to move on to a couple other things.
How do we pay for it? We just ask.
We're just going to
Tax Elon Musk.
And it's so...
He's got enough.
Here's actually an example of where I said this back to him, but he was responding to Nick Shirley, who was responding to him, making arguments like this. Essentially, Nick Shirley says, start using the money wisely. No need to tax anyone more. Stop asking for more money until you guys figure out how to spend it correctly. That's a good starting point. They should also just do way less stuff. That's always the problem with everyone wanting to go after fraud. You should go after fraud. And then you should go after everything else they do too.
Yeah,
They don't need to be doing that either. But sure, we can go after fraud. Ro Khanna responds with, if it went directly to families making $150,000, would you support it? This is about taxing the billionaires to save healthcare in California. He said if it went directly to families making $150,000, I assume he means $150,000 or less, would you support it? Bernie and my plan gives a check of $3,000 to working families.
Oh, we've seen that work before.
There you go. That'll work really well. And so the same thing, and this is a time that I responded to him with this, they always come up with these new ways that we're going to tax people. Now we're going to tax the billionaires, and we're going to raise however many $1 billion it's going to be every year. And here's this new program that we're going to spend it on. It's never, we're going to tax the billionaires and we're going to gather up $500 billion more dollars and we're going to have a lower deficit. So we borrow less money and pay less in interest every single year and don't have to keep taxing your grandchildren to pay for stuff that we're doing today. That's never what they talk about doing. It's always a new thing. Like we got a projected $1.9 trillion deficit this year. That's projected to go up to like 3.6 by like 2030, 3.6 trillion deficit per year.
This is based on the big, beautiful bill.
And this is based off of us surviving that long. And that's the bigger part.
Yeah. If we make it there.
If we make it that long, that's what they're saying it's going to be. And if we don't come up with any new ways to spend money before 2030, that's what they're saying it's going to be. And they still come up with these new programs every time they talk about taxing more money. I'd at least take them a little bit more seriously if they said, we're going to tax the billionaires. We're going to raise an extra $500 billion every year somehow, magically.
And we're going to balance the budget.
And we're going to go towards balancing the budget. Or at least we're going to use that money to pay half of our interest expenses this year. That way, we don't have to put our interest expenses on a new credit card that has more interest expenses on top of that, which is what we do every year. And then we'll have, well, still more every year, but less than what it would have been. And isn't that better? That's not what they want to do. They want to keep spending. They want to keep the $2 trillion deficit, have new programs that are going to cost twice as much as what they say they're going to cost, with half of the good things coming out of them as what they say is going to happen.
Money they're going to receive. As
yeah,
they say
and they're going to get
it.
half. That's right. They're going to get half the tax money. The program is going to cost twice as much as what they're projecting, and it's going to get about a half or a quarter of the benefit as what they're actually saying it's going to be. And that's the difference.
5 to 10% of their plan.
That's the difference between like a politician telling you things that we're going to do and what actually happens in the real world. It's so funny. Like that happens every time. And it's still every time people are like, isn't that going to be so great? That's awesome. You know how when we were talking about the war, remember the war that's going on?
Kind of.
And we were like, at the very beginning of the war, we were like, that's great. Let's just accept that what Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin are telling us, let's be like, okay, that's cool. That all sounds great. That's well and good. Now, let's take into account the fact that the U.S. government's going to be the one trying to do that and that they're going to fail at what they're doing because they're the U.S. government. And then you do the calculation. You say, well, is it worth it for us to get 5% of what they're saying is going to happen, or negative, or even end up with a worse situation than what's going to happen because it's the U.S. government who's doing it. Because now a bunch of people are looking at it and say, well, this doesn't really seem worth it now, does it? Well, that's because you never took into account the fact that it was the U.S. government trying to achieve goals, which they're really terrible at doing.
The worst corporation in the world.
And that's also happening with the left. Now, here's a clip of Ro Khanna and this girl, I think, named Jennifer Welch, who is just awful, just a real terrible person, where he's talking about Elon Musk, talking about DOGE and the cuts to USAID, and has some words to say.
And I do believe that once we take power, there has to be accountability. There needs to be accountability for Elon Musk. You know, they're celebrating that he created 4,400 millionaires, but they don't talk about the 4.5 million children around the world who he possibly sentenced to death by dismantling USAID. He needs to answer for that. He needs to be subpoenaed. He needs to face investigation. He needs to answer for what he did with DOGE. That it's not just let's move on. And we will use the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee to hold people accountable who violated.
So I got a couple issues with this. First off, he talks about how people are celebrating the fact that he created 4,400 millionaires with SpaceX. And that's just SpaceX employees, not all the other people who have invested in Elon Musk companies. That should be celebrated. That's a really great thing. But he says they're talking about how he created 4,400 millionaires at SpaceX, but they're not talking about the fact that with the cuts at USAID, that 4.5 million children are going to die by 2030. And my first response to that is really cold and terrible. It is not anyone in America's responsibility to be forced to give money to try and save people in other countries. It's just not at all.
By the way, we already do that freely.
We do it,
yeah.
Yes. And
I personally have sponsored kids through whatever those charities are called. They get me with those commercials they had before. Mm-hmm. I received a welcome packet.
I still pay monthly to Care International or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. But still, we still got this number, and we're going to talk about the study because the study mentions that there are other people that give money to those causes. So here in America, should we celebrate that 4,400 employees of a company just became millionaires because the company went public? Or should we say, well, that's great, but their leader did help cut off tax money going to Africa or something like that, and is going to lead to the deaths of 4.5 million children and 14 million others? And to which my response is, that's not my job to pay for that. It's not your job to pay for that. It's not the United States government's responsibility to pay for that.
To be forced to pay for it.
To be forced to pay for it.
Yeah.
Like, we'll put you in prison if you don't pay for it kind of situation, which is not good. That doesn't make you a good person. It means you got a gun to your head. Like, no one's like, oh, look, that guy's a great guy. Someone put a gun to his head and he gave him money.
And by the way, what percentage of USAID was actually going towards that versus all of the nefarious things that USAID was doing?
Yeah, the actual second response to what he just said is that number is BS. And the study that he's citing is also it's just all complete like model projections. And we'll talk about that just a little bit because I have been digging into that some. Now, Elon Musk didn't like that. He didn't like it. In fact, he said, I believe, has said that he is potentially looking at suing Ro Khanna for these things in another post, and has called him Ro the Robber. Which is why today's episode right now is called Ro the Robber Khanna. I like it. Ro the Robber sounds pretty good.
It's taking a page out of Trump's book with nicknames.
Yeah, we just do Robber Khanna if you want to do that. And so talking about taxes, Ro Khanna responds, says, Elon, how about just paying the 5% instead of hurling random insults? And here are the facts, man. Your USAID cuts did this. And then he points to a study that says, your cuts did this. Now, the first problem with the study is that at the end of the study, it says this study doesn't prove anything. You should always look at the limitations on a study. Like that anytime you open a study, whether it's telling you something that you want to believe or something that you don't want to believe, just to get a little bit of baseline understanding with the study, you should go to a very important section called limitations. That's where you go and you look at the limitations. And so before you talk about anything with the study, you need to know in the back of your mind that the people who published the study said, this study does not fully eliminate the possibility that the associations might not reflect a true causal relationship. They think the findings should be interpreted as providing strong support for a causal relationship, but they do not constitute definitive evidence. Now, that's from the people who wrote and published the study, essentially saying our study does not give you evidence that this is for sure what happened. Now, politicians will then take that and say,
you did this.
This is for sure what happened. Here are the facts. Your cuts did this. And point to a study that says, our study does not prove that he did this. Like, think about how stupid that is.
Yeah.
It's pretty ridiculous. And so we keep hearing about the
Did Elon respond to that?
I don't know if he responded to, let's see. I responded to it a couple. No, he has not responded. He would be up there at the top. So, no, hasn't responded to that. Maybe he's getting a lawyer right now. Who knows? I'm having an interesting back and forth with someone who I'm not 100% sure is a real person, but I'm still having a good time anyway, having the argument with them. And like this person said, a podcast named Good Morning Liberty advocating for the criminalization of speech is a little too on the nose, meaning they think that because I said the study is BS, that means I want Elon to sue Ro Khanna. In fact, I don't care. Actually, that wasn't the purpose at all. I said he's threatening to sue a member of the U.S. government for falsely attributing millions of deaths to his name. Khanna stated that he needs to be investigated and face accountability. I said I'm not sure he has a case, but provable defamation from a member of the government is not free speech. Like, first off, this person's like fighting for the freedom of people in the government to say whatever they want, to which I just, no. Come on, this is the 250th anniversary, man. Screw those people. I'm not doing that. They said not liking conclusions of a paper isn't proof of defamation. Well, that's responding to something where I said I'm not sure he has a case. That's where I think I'm not sure this person's real. Just funny how quickly you jump to restrict the freedoms of people who disagree with you. And I said, I will restrict the freedom of politicians any day of the week with my conscience clear and my heart full.
Amen.
That was my response to that. And I firmly believe that. I think that is good. Now, the study is pretty funny because they basically say that between 2001 and 2021, USAID saved 91 million lives, around 90 million lives. Like people who would have died otherwise, if not for USAID. And Reason did a nice write-up on this. I pulled up the study and went through a bunch of it, and they're pretty fair with it. But first off, on its face, it doesn't make any sense because they're doing 2001 to 2021. If you took the actual mortality rate in 2001 and assumed it stayed at that rate, then the number would be 79 million lives, not 90. And so they're actually like adding in 11 million more people that they saved somehow. The study also takes out the great financial crisis and COVID because the mortality rate spiked up those years.
Weird. Why would they take those out?
They just pulled out those years. Said that it just wasn't fair to put those in there, which I think it would be an even more important year for USAID to be functioning and doing their job if that is in fact what they're supposed to be doing. But since it was a hard year, we're going to take out their results that year. That's just not fair to do that kind of thing.
It doesn't align with the narrative we're trying to push.
No, it just doesn't align.
Just like when we talk about taxes and that frickin' Zuck study where they just eliminate people who get money back from the government.
Yeah, they just don't count that.
They just don't count. We take those out.
No, they still paid taxes, even though tax money was given back to them, and they got more money back than they paid in. They still paid taxes.
And politicians still quote those studies.
They still do. Over and over again, they quote those studies. Now, this is where they show that where's the actual 11 million people. They're not really going to show you that. There's other things that make this study not make any sense, like the fact that USAID is 60% of U.S. foreign aid, and also that number is only about 30% of all the foreign aid from all the other people around the world that gets spent in those areas. So we're only a third of the money that gets pushed into those areas for foreign aid. But they essentially attributed all of the reduction in mortality to USAID and not the other people. And so now that USAID is getting pulled out, or mostly pulled out, and like all those people are going to die and not be helped by the other 2/3 of money that's still going to them from other countries. So that's interesting also. Also, of that reduced 90 million that they project, half of it was in China. Just half of that was reduced mortality in China over that time, a country that gets the lowest amount. The countries that got the most amount, especially per capita from USAID, their mortality rates went up during that time.
Maybe because we weren't spending the money on actually helping people.
So
we haven't even taken into account of where the dollars actually went.
Yeah. So
okay, the money went there. What was it actually spent on? Do we even know that?
No.
Because was it spent on actually like buying vaccines in this particular area?
I'm sure some of it was. I'm sure some of it was.
Was any of it spent on, I don't know, stirring up a revolution within the communities?
No.
Was any of it spent on
but you haven't considered how many lives that revolution would save. So that's money. That's a life saved by USAID once again.
Exactly.
By the way, they haven't cut the whole program. They rolled it under the State Department. They cut like 4,500 out of the 6,000 programs that USAID did. So there's still a lot of programs happening. Now they cut off some AIDS fighting and stuff like that. You know, that's sad. And like, you can make an argument. You can make the argument that cutting off some of those programs will lead to more people dying than otherwise would have. And that is a great reason for anyone who cares about that to get on a freaking website and give them your credit card information and send the money over to those people. That is not a reason for you to put a gun to my head or anyone else's head and force it to be given to the U.S. government so they can help start revolutions while also handing out some AIDS meds at the same time, because that's what USAID is doing. And so, yeah, anyone who wants to put money in, they can do it. There's plenty of organizations helping people in these countries. Plenty.
Someone from the Fed Haters Club, not on YouTube though, so I don't know if I can mention their name. I don't know how this works now.
Okay.
But they did say USAID does make millionaires out of opportunistic people in Minnesota.
Yes, they do.
And California, apparently.
All over the place. People helping people. Powerful stuff. It's just, just not the people that they say they're going to help. It's themselves. But, hey, that's a good thing, I guess. I don't know. All right. So what bothers me so much about this is, first off, Ro Khanna, who presents himself. Now, this is the guy who teamed up with Thomas Massie to go after the Epstein files and all that. And that's great. That's a good thing. He's one of these guys that seems to actually believe the things he's saying most of the time. Like he's being honest, which is worse. Like, well, no, I guess it's not worse. But he honestly believes these things, I think. He's just very wrong about most of the things that he brings up. Now, does he honestly believe them? Because he is worth $200 million. And to my knowledge, has not written any extra checks over to the U.S. Treasury or anything like that.
Ro Khanna's worth $200 million?
Yeah.
Oh, but we got to tax the billionaires.
Billionaires. They're a problem. Billionaires are a problem, Charlie.
Yeah, God. Yeah.
This is better than Elizabeth Warren's plan, which is to tax people over $50 million. He's got a new plan. It's called the billionaires tax.
Yeah, exactly.
That's going after the really bad people.
What's Elizabeth Warren's net worth? Like 27
probably
million?
49 million. I don't know. It bothers me because people bring up this USAID thing all the time, and not because they're attributing deaths to Elon Musk. I'm not friends with Elon Musk, don't know him. It's that they're saying that this program that the U.S. government was funding so important that there's just, and this is what's going to happen with any program that anyone tries to cut. And it's why you got to try and bring up as many facts on these things as possible. Like if you're listening to this show, you're probably a libertarian or libertarian leaning, which means you think the government ought to cut a hell of a lot of programs. Well, this is them cutting like really a small program and not even the entire thing. And this is them cutting that. And it was just funding stuff in other countries, and still the person who was at the helm of doing that is essentially getting called like a murderer. And you got people who in our government to say, yeah, well, over 4,000 people at his company, including people who work in the cafeteria, just became millionaires. And I'm a socialist. I should like that. But he did cut funding that might lead to the deaths of people in Africa. And so that's a big problem, which means they're going to ignore the fact that the workers have ownership of the company and are becoming millionaires. So they can still point out the fact that people in Africa might be suffering because of something that Elon Musk did. Why? Because he has to be a villain. They can't point out any of the good things. He must be a villain, and they must take ownership of his stuff. That's what they want. And they're going to do this with any program that anyone ever tries to cut. Meals on Wheels or whatever. Like that's probably one of the last ones you go towards or whatever. But any program like that people try to cut, it's going to be, you killed this person by cutting this program.
You did it. You evil.
So you can't let them get away with it.
Evil capitalist trillionaire.
Here's
if SpaceX keeps on this trajectory, though, he won't be a trillionaire soon.
No, they're coming down pretty good. I don't remember what the price was it needed to be for him to be a trillionaire. Do you remember?
I think it's 139 or something like that.
I think that's right. Yeah,
it has to remain at 139 or above for him to be a trillionaire.
But Tesla's up a little bit today, so he's getting some help from that right now.
Maybe
too.
it just needs to be the IPO price then.
This is a guy named, I don't know who this guy is actually. David Friedberg? Is that his name from the All In podcast? I should know who he is. He seems like he's supposed to be an important person and I should know his name. He did a good job talking about Ro Khanna.
Oh yeah, he's like an investor.
Because they were going back and forth on this whole thing. And here's him.
The Politburo is the leaders who elect themselves to dictate the flow of the economy, the allocation of capital, what work individuals are allowed to do, and what activities they're allowed to do in an unfree society, which is what they're creating. They are the true oligarchs. And this is Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna. This is the group that is trying to coalesce power and create for themselves a system whereby they have greater influence, greater control over aspects of the economy. They want to seize the means of production. They want to control education. They want to control media. And anytime there's an effort by an individual enterprise or an individual themselves to go out and build a business and succeed and do something that's outside of their scope and their span of control, they lose their minds over it. And that's what we're seeing. So I react to their tweeting and their bullshit, where they're basically trying to contort things about inequality and fairness and justice, when the truth is they are the rising empire, the evil empire in Star Wars. They are the folks who want to take from all of us what we were endowed with when this nation was started and what many people came to this country for, which is individual freedom and liberty, the ability to build a business in peace, the ability to make decisions, to do what you want with your own assets, and to have functionally private property. And they're taking it all away, and they're trying to take it all away. And we're watching piece by piece, step by step. So they are forming a Politburo where they can effectively control the economy, control education, control the media, and tell us all what we can and can't do and say. And
it was pretty good. Pretty good explanation.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with that. I don't know that guy. I don't know anything about him or what kind of stuff he pushes at all.
Well, he's a super rich guy. So Can't trust.
You can't trust him. He's just trying to protect his own bottom line.
Exactly.
He's trying to protect his oligarchy. Is what's happening. They talked a little bit about this tech billionaire oligarchy on Bill Maher. Here's
OpenAI. Dario Amodei from Anthropic. The dude from Google DeepMind. Alex Wang from Meta. In other words, the AI guys are now sitting at the table at the G7. Ro, are you proud of this or alarmed?
Alarmed. Let me say this. I know these folks.
You represent them.
I represent them. As we're approaching the...
So your best friends?
Not all my best friends. Some of them don't like me. They spent a lot of money trying to defeat me. But the point is this. As we approach the 250th year anniversary of this country, let me just say this. We didn't fight a revolution to be ruled by tech billionaires. And right now these two...
That is an argument he is making for the government to take more control over the economy.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
What did we fight the Revolutionary War for? And who did we fight it against?
I think to have more powerful government, to prevent private property from getting too valuable, to prevent people in the market from assigning too high of a value to people's private property.
And what's so strange is he says that and then gets a cheer from the crowd.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't fight the Revolutionary War to be ruled by tech billionaires or a tech oligarchy, whatever he said. It's like, okay, well, why did we fight the Revolutionary War? The whole premise of it was a overbearing government in which we lost freedoms.
Dude, a guy in...
that are endowed by our creator.
A guy in the government just used the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence as an argument for why the government should take more control over the private economy.
And got cheers from the crowd.
Got cheers from the audience while he did it.
Yeah.
So, Ryan Grimm from Drop Site News, the last thing we'll talk about, and then we'll get out of here. He noticed, now I like Ryan Grimm when it comes to foreign policy. Drop Site News is great when it comes to foreign policy most of the time, like the stuff I've seen anyway. They've been pretty great on that. Really bad on economics, super bad, like socialist bad on economics. And it's sad to see that happen because he's so good on one thing and so retarded on the other. And honestly, he's so bad on this that it makes me question my foreign policy because I align with him on it. I'm like, there might be something wrong with my foreign policy because there's no way we can align on these things. But we do. So he has noticed an argument that we have made, which is everyone's talking about this wealth tax with Elon Musk, and everyone's bringing up a really good argument, which is that it is in shares of a company that he owns. And if you were to force him to pay this wealth tax, he would have to sell a bunch of shares of his company, and that'd be really bad. So Ryan Grimm found the solution for this. So he says there are a lot of billionaires on this app who are obviously quite adept at making money, yet pretend they don't understand finance when it comes to the topic of a wealth tax. They say it's impossible, it's too complicated. We'd love to, but it's unworkable. He said, this is silly. Our financial industry has figured out how to turn the most abstract concepts into concrete financial products that can be traded in markets. Let's say we have an annual 1% wealth tax. It could easily work like this. Your shares in SpaceX or whatever are locked up, fine, or illiquid, fine. Just pay with 1% of those shares. No need to sell. You can create a financial product that's tied to those shares. Billionaires say they're afraid that they'll have to pay a wealth tax on their assets, and then their asset prices will go down, and they'll have paid a tax on wealth they no longer have. Fair enough. Just pay the tax with the shares themselves. If the price goes down, the government eats it, and you're no worse off. Now, the argument he's making right there is that the government should actually tax and take 1% ownership of your ownership in your company
every year.
And that is, yes, that is the argument that he is making in order to pay a tax. And since you can't just sell the shares to pay the tax, obviously, well, that's fine. Just transfer that ownership of your company to the government, and that'll be the tax. And they'll definitely not have voting rights, they promise. But this is how dumb the argument gets. And this is why it's so disappointing coming from someone that I listen to.
By the way, if you just take
frequently.
it at face value, how long does that last?
Well, it would last precisely 100 years.
100 years,
That's it.
exactly.
But it wouldn't even last that. I mean,
No, I know it wouldn't.
not
I'm
at
just
all.
saying, just like simple
Yeah.
face value. You could take a 1% for 100 years, and then the government would have 100% of your shares. And then they can't tax you
I got to
anymore.
respond with a quote tweet saying Ryan Grimm releases a 100-year plan to destroy private ownership.
Yeah.
Now, technically, you'd be the 1% would get smaller each year, so it would, it would, I guess, never technically be gone. But yes, everyone understands. Okay, there's one really obvious reason that this is no better than the original argument, which is just to force them to give the money. Okay, so they give you the 1% of the shares, right? Now, why does the government want this? Well, as Ro Khanna says, or Bernie, or Elizabeth Warren, or any of the others say, it's to fund childcare or to
Student loan forgiveness.
Or free school for Afghanis with AIDS or whatever it is that we're gonna do. I don't. It's the holy shirts and pants, like when they get the and so it's like to fund all these glorious things. Well, the problem is, you can't just take your shares over to the school and be like, hey, here's 0.0001 of these shares. You can take that. Actually, they'd be smart if they did take that, and maybe they should. But they're not. They need money to pay for these things to happen. So what are they going to do? They got two options. Sell the shares, which now brings you back to the original problem of selling that much of the company at one time, and everyone knowing that the government's going to do this, meaning the asset value is going to crash, meaning you're always chasing, like with the tax, if it's $1 trillion, you're going to tax it at 1%, it's worth this much, but then the asset value crashes, so now it's 1% of that, and it crashes further than that, now it's 1% of that. This is why so many countries have gotten rid of their wealth taxes. It's impossible to calculate. Like, you don't know what's your snapshot and what do you do, what do you do afterwards? And so how do you value these things? And so you're still going to sell it, or here's what they would actually do. They would keep the shares and they would borrow against them.
They would print the money.
They wouldn't print it. They would borrow, right?
Same thing.
They'd issue, And so they would go and they say, well, we just got
$1 billion.
We just got $1 billion in SpaceX. So we're going to take out a loan against that, and we're going to spend this new $1 billion on all these great things. Now, what's the problem with that? Like, okay, you tax that away, but then since you don't have any money and you just had to borrow this money, now you got to pay back on that loan that you just took from that $1 billion. And so how are you going to pay that back? You're going to issue either new taxes or new fake money or new debt to pay that back eventually. It essentially just becomes like another
it's a hamster in a wheel.
Asset-backed debt that the government is going to be taking out to pay for these new things. Okay, the dividends on on those shares are not going to pay back 100% of the value of the loan that you took out. Nothing like that. The things that they spend that money on are not going to return that much money back to the government. Someone posted a meme like laughing at me saying that the government doesn't invest in things that produce returns in relation to this idea. Like, I don't think that's not really a joke. They've taxed.
I wasn't kidding. You wrote it down in your diary. I'm not joking.
They've taxed and spent like $100 trillion since we got the income tax, and we're $40 trillion in debt right now. You shouldn't look at an organization that's $40 trillion in debt that takes in $5 trillion a year and be like, oh, that's ridiculous to think that they don't invest in valuable things that return a bunch of money. Like, no, they're going to be giving it to poor people who, like, by their own logic, don't get taxed anyway. And so how are you planning on them recouping the money? It's just going to be a bunch more debt. And then the next year, you would think, well, they can take their next year's 1% tax of the company to pay towards that. But the problem is they got to fund those programs again the next year. What happens if the value's gone down a bunch off of that? Well, are you going to cut the budget on that? Probably not going to cut the budget on that. You're just going to borrow more money elsewhere. I mean, all you're doing is talking about borrowing money to fund new programs. The only difference here is it's backed by an asset, technically. But who cares?
You know what we should do? We should create a model on seeing like how long these asset classes will last as we're taking out 1% wealth tax on them each year and modeling whether the asset class goes up or down, but then also modeling the debt that the government has to take on to borrow against these and then see how long that lasts. Like you're going to see an exponential decline in how long that asset class will actually last and be valuable at all.
Mm-hmm.
But then basically what happens is the government then by default is leveraged against their own debt. Okay. And then the value of the assets going down. So imagine like if you're trading stocks and let's say you're 10 times leveraged on a short position, that's how you get the golden squeeze or whatever that they talked about with GameStop. You know, you could look at it in a very simple way like that because the government has to borrow against it and then it's going down and they're not going to change that. It essentially makes them leveraged in their own debt, which then guess who pays for that?
It sounds like the housing market collapse is what it sounds like, you know,
except
like
it's,
the houses
except
going
it's
down.
the United States.
Yeah.
It's country collapse.
The moral of the story is this is not a solution to the problem. What Ryan Grimm found was an easier mechanism to get the thing that he wants, which is actually government ownership of the means of production. It's not an easier way to get the thing.
Well, what about Picasso, man?
Oh, he does talk about.
Yeah.
This is where it gets more complicated. What about an asset like Picasso? Easy. You create a derivative product that is worth 1% of your Picasso when it is eventually sold. Before it's sold, the government can sell that product into a market and exchange it for cash or hold it. What the government would obviously do is create billionaire asset-backed securities and sell them as financial products, just like we do with mortgage-backed securities or any other asset-backed securities.
Yeah, great.
He's
Good idea.
literally arguing to do like a 2008 financial crisis, but on a level just never seen before.
Now, look, by the way, okay, we need to be honest about this. This actually does happen. I mean, it just doesn't get given to the government, but this is how billionaires actually spend money. They do take out a financial product backed by their shares so that they can have cash to spend on whatever it is, a yacht or a home or whatever.
Lines of credit based on their assets.
Exactly. So that does happen. Here where it falls apart, it's not like these products don't exist. These derivative-backed products or whatever you want to call them, if it's a billionaire asset-backed securities, those actually do exist. That's how billionaires do what I just said. However, the difference is they're actually spending money in the economy, getting assets in return for those, versus the government giving that to the means of destruction and not production.
Well, and
so
the difference is with lines of credit is that the billionaires have to find a way to be productive enough to pay those back off, or they have to find a way for their company to be productive enough to, increase in value enough to pay it back off. Maybe.
Well, they're personally tied to
it. And they have to find a way to do that. And so they're basically talking about doing that, only the government doing it and doing nothing productive. And
that's why I said,
the means of
destruction.
That's good. I like that line.
You're gonna do the same thing, but you're gonna give it to people who are gonna, buy food or whatever with it. But the problem is then that is consumed. It's not sitting in something that can then be sold later on. Like for instance, a house. Like if a billionaire takes out a line of credit or some derivative product of their assets to then purchase a home that they live in, if the value of their assets starts to diminish or whatever, they could sell that asset to then pay off the line of credit and reinvest or whatever. If you give it to the government, this is where they're going to give it to someone and they're going to pay off their student loans or whatever. But then poof, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exist. It's not something that is worth anything anymore. So that's the real problem with something like this, along with all the other things we talked about, modeling, the government taking 1% of an asset class, and you compound that over the years with the means, giving it to the means of destruction. Very quickly, that asset class is devalued.
Yeah, like
exponentially.
Like I was saying, that it's a creative way that Ryan Grimm came up with to take government ownership of the means of production. It doesn't change anything about how impossible it's going to be to actually do the things that he says he wants to do, which is like helping poor people or whatever, because that's not really his point. What he found was a creative way for the government to take ownership of these companies and to punish rich people. And that was his actual goal. And he is right. This is an easier way for them to do that, to force them to hand over shares of their companies so they don't have to sell them. That is an easier way for them to do it. Now, what happens afterwards with what they're going to do with that and try to help, that's secondary or worse than that in Ryan Grimm's mind. That's not the point of the whole exercise. It's to take away ownership from the successful and productive people in society, because those are the people that he hates.
Now, I have a question.
Yeah.
If this is implemented and it takes place, once their net worth drops below $1 billion, do they get any money back? So they can go back to being worth $1 billion?
I don't know.
It's like you taxed all of this fugazi, this net worth that doesn't actually exist on paper. And now their net worth drops below whatever threshold you set, if it's the billionaires tax or whatever. What happens then? Let's say their net worth is now only like $100 million. I mean, what if they go broke?
Anyone with $1 trillion business, first off, would just break their corporation into 1,000 different pieces. So that would be worth $1 billion a piece. Yeah. That'd be the best. But I guess you personally would still have to pay on that.
No, we're here with Nate from SpaceX Anonymous. What are you working on, Nate? It looks like you build screw.
Yeah.
You build a screw.
We got the screws
that they use for the Raptor engines. Do you have any nuts in there? No, we
it's
just
over
work
at
on the
SpaceX
screws.
Nuts. You want to talk to the nut guy. That's the one doing that. Here's a little closer, 30-second closer with some good points in it.
Separate separate it all out to where they're just working on one individual part.
Yeah.
We got a contract with SpaceX Nuts. Space Nuts.
Space Nuts.
We got a contract with Space Nuts. We're Space Screws.
All right. Easy 30 seconds. Just the answers are so simple. And this guy does a great job. Here you go.
We should take Elon Musk's $1 trillion and use it to solve world hunger.
Except Africa's been given $2.6 trillion in foreign aid since 1960.
How about we use it to fix the education system?
Except the US already spends $1.3 trillion a year on it.
Let's end poverty then.
Except America's already spent over $22 trillion fighting poverty.
We should just tax him more.
Except, if you had a bet on who could solve a major world problem, would you pick the government or Elon?
Yeah, probably the guy landing rockets backwards.
Exactly.
Probably the guy landing rockets backwards. Pretty good. See, even people with British accents can do smart things sometimes, you know?
They get it.
It's not too bad. All right, let's get out of here. I got to pee.
That was good. That was a good ending.
That's fun.
That.
Yep.
That's how simple it can be.
It's so simple.
Maybe we should trust the guy who figured out how to land rockets backwards. Maybe.
No, the response would be, no, he didn't do that. The workers did that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway. All right, y'all. Well, if you enjoyed today's episode, share it around. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate you there. If you want to spend some money on the show, then you can be part of the Fed Haters Club. Sign up on YouTube or go to our website, goodmorningliberty.us. Click Join GML. Be part of the Fed Haters Club, where you'll learn all about real economics and liberty. It doesn't matter where you come from, whether you're libertarian or liberty-leaning conservative. You can learn more and figure out how we can actually solve the problems that exist today, and that doesn't involve simple answers like eating the rich.
We'll just tax the rich. Yeah.
It involves actually trying to solve the problem. If you enjoy
Unless your
that kind of
problem
stuff.
is that there are rich people. See, like I said, that's the problem those people are actually trying to solve. They're just pretending that it has to do with poor people. But their number one problem is that rich people exist.
It's not rich people, though. It's the fact that they're covetous or envious.
Yeah.
Because remember, if you look at that chart, they're the ones that are taxed too much, not the other guys.
Not the other guys. No, it's me.
That was the funniest part about that whole study.
Pretty good part.
So anyway, like I said, if you enjoy things like that, sign up. GoodMorningLiberty.us and then hit Join GML or sign up on YouTube. You'll get access to the private Discord. Hang out with the other Fed haters and join us live every single day when we go live.
Could be anytime.
When we want to.
Got to stay on your toes with that one.
Do all those things or don't. I don't really care. If you want to support the sponsors, support the show, visit the links in the show notes to support the sponsors. And if you do all that, we'll be back again tomorrow.
Could be. It's possible.
Until then, you stay classy and have a good morning, Liberty.
It's great. It's great stuff.